Welcome back to Triple Threat Podcast. We continue our prediction series with the NFC South. And that's my division. I'm repping my Saints jersey, so I'm going to try to be as impartial and as unbiased as humanly possible. I'm just going to give you the objective statistics, the objective offseason moves, and I'm going to try and make sure that I can make sure that I give you a honest and accurate opinion. My partner Ishan says, who does the podcast with me, unfortunately he's not here, but he is a Falcons fan, and so I did have some input with him. But this is going to be a completely unbiased. Well, there's going to be some partly biased. I'm going to try and remove all my bias from this and give you the objective truth or predictions. I don't know anything for sure. So let's get into this division with last place, the Carolina Panthers. And although they'll finish last, I really like this team. I think they're heading in a really good direction, and I think that this whole team as a unit has the chance to. I think they could finish as high as second in the division this year. I genuinely do. I think this team is not going to roll over and die like a lot of people expect them to do. So let's get into their offseason moves, and then we'll talk about their roster a little bit. So with their offseason, they brought in Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback. They brought in Robbie Anderson. They brought in Seth Roberts. They brought in Tahir White. They brought in Trey Boston. They lost a couple of players. They lost Bruce Irvin, John McCoy, Greg Olsen, James Bradbury, Mario Addison, and Butler and Dante Poe. So they lost a lot of key assets on defense, but obviously Cam Newton as well. How can I forget Cam Newton? So this lineup, let's look at it as a whole. So let's start with the offensive group. So their offensive line, they traded away Tri-Turner and got Russell Okung. That'll be a little bit of a short-term fix, but overall, this offensive line is fairly good. They got Taylor Moton at right tackle who played fairly well. Sean Miller, who's not the most inspiring right guard, but who's capable. Matt Paris is a really quality center. Had a bad year last year. That's just because he was on a pretty porous team. I think that Michael Schofield, not a great guard. Their guard spots are a little bit questionable, but their tackles and center spots are solid. And let's talk about Teddy Bridgewater, because Teddy Bridgewater, he's a game manager. And I love Teddy Bridgewater. He's the greatest human. He's an incredible guy. But on the football field, I watched him for 5 games last season, and his decision-making is really slow. He had lower air yards than Drew Brees did per pass, which everyone knocks on Drew Brees for throwing really short passes. So Teddy Bridgewater is a very conservative passer of the ball. He can let it fly. We saw him in the Tampa Bay game. He eventually got licensed to throw. But I think that he's going to be able to be conservative, keep hold of the ball, make sure this team's in games. And he'll be great at handing the ball off to McCaffrey and passing him out of the backfield. So if you look at the weapons that he has DJ Moore, who I think is an absolute star. I think he's going to be a top 5 receiver, top 10 receiver this season. He was a top 10 receiver last year. I think he's going to be an absolute star this year. Robbie Anderson and Curtis Samuel. Those are 3 really good receivers. I think that Teddy Bridgewater in this offense will have they will keep this team in a lot of games. Their issue is probably going to be secondary. So if they're going against a team that's at 11 personnel, they're gonna have Justin Burris, Dante Jackson, and Troy Pride Jr. probably as their 3 cornerbacks on the field, which is a little bit concerning. And then their linebacking core, they replaced Luke Kuechly, who retired, with Tahir Whitehead. Obviously, he's a big partner with Shaq Thompson. Still a really good linebacking core. Not as great as it was, but still pretty good. They put a decent defensive line, a great defensive interior. This run defense is going to be top 10 this year. Kawan Short and Derek Brown. And I'll get into the draft in a little bit, but that's a really, really good defensive front. Then they have Brian Burns and Yetur Gross-Matos, who are 2 incredibly athletic players. And then you also have, if you're going to go into maybe a 3-4 personnel, Zach Kerr is a defensive interior player who's really good against the run as well. I fully expect this to be a great run team, and that's going to be able to keep them in a lot of games. Their secondary is fine. Trey Boston, obviously, and then they all have Justin Burris, as I said before. So a fine secondary. So this roster as a whole is pretty solid overall, and I expect them to perform fairly well. And let's get into the draft, because I think this is where they really shine. A lot of media personnel are really slamming this team for the draft, but I I'd argue that this team killed the draft. Their worst pick was Derek Brown. And he is a sure thing, surefire, incredible run stuffer. We know that for a fact that he's going to be an incredible run player. My only problem is that pick 7, you could have had Isaiah Simmons. And that's going to knock that pick down for me. So they've made it a very safe pick for a rebuilding team that's probably fine, but I would have liked to see them be more aggressive. And then in the second one, you get Yetur Gross-Matos. Incredible pick, great value, great player, great fit. He's going to be – you can play him outside linebacker, you can play him at defensive end, stand up. I think him and Brian Burns would be a great duo to watch going forward. Then Jeremy Chin at pick 64. I love this pick. Jeremy Chin is an athletic freak. He's great in coverage. He's just a great safety. I think he's going to be incredible. I think he's a little cheap comparison to make his Isaiah Simmons light, but I mean that's the best thing he can do. He can play all over the field. I think I'd be surprised if he doesn't start at safety by at least October. I think he's a great player. Then Troy Price Jr. is a solid quarterback. Like he can take over and play solid corner position. So I think that's a really good pick. And then my favorite pick, Kenny Robinson. The guy that went to the XFL, the St. Louis Battlehawks, went from West Virginia to go help his mom pay for some treatment because he's just – I think that's a great move for him. He got paid. He lost draft stock because a lot of teams don't want to be the first to draft an XFL player. To be the first on a trend is really hard to do. The Panthers, they identified this player, I think, could be a first or second round player. I think he's incredible. He can play corner. He can play safety. I think he might be their starting corner by at least October or November. I think he's that great of a player. I think they got a steal in Kenny Robinson. A-plus pick. Bravion Roy at pick 184. Matt Rose already worked with him at Baylor. He's a great D-tackle. Just only going to help this defensive line just be a great group. They've got a lot of players on this defensive front. I love this team. I think this team – I underrate this team. I really wanted to put them as like a sneaky wild card team. I really did. And if I knew, I will bet the over every single day. Over under a 5.5. This team is going to get over 5.5 wins. I really do think that. I truly believe this team that's really sneaky good. So 6-10 is my prediction. A little bit harsh. At first, I think I had them at like 8 wins, but I had to knock that down a little bit. I had to give wins to other teams, but I really like this Panthers unit. I think give this team 3 years, they're going to be a star. They've got a great receiver. They've got a great running back. They've got a lot of defensive personnel. This team, you just bring in a couple offensive linemen. I think this team's almost back to the playoffs. So this team did a really good job. I think Matt Rule was a really good hire. I think the only reason I don't put them in the playoff team is the first-year coach with the short offseason and a new quarterback. It's going to be really hard to gel together. So that's my only real concern. But overall, this team's really solid. Their strength of schedule it's pretty decent or pretty hard because, they have to play the Saints twice, the Bucs and Falcons twice. So it's tied 20th, toughest in the league. So that's going to be an issue for them. Tough schedule, and that's the reason why I have them at 6 wins. But talent-wise, this team's going to be pushing teams. They're going to be in a lot of one-score games. So do not be surprised when you see the Panthers in some fun games. I'm going to be looking out to watch for them. I used to hate the Panthers. They weren't a likable team. But now that I kind of share Teddy Bridgewater. I mean, they play the Saints. I'm going to dislike them because they're in my division. I can't like the Panthers, but they've got a likable personnel. They've got a young and up-and-coming team. So this is a team for a neutral perspective. It's going to be fun to watch. So moving on, I have the Atlanta Falcons going 8-8. So it's an interesting roster. Their front seven looks really nice again. So they bring in Dante Fowler. They bring in Marlon Davidson. They still have Tab McKinley, Grady Jarrett, Deion Jones, and Forrest Hunter-Luacan. Looks like a really solid defensive front. So their really big concern is the Roy Reynolds at starting linebacker. A little bit concerned about that. Isaiah Oliver and A.J. Terrell are really young cornerback, but they both have potential. A.J. Terrell is a really good man-to-man cornerback. But his problem is at the catch. I'll get into this throughout the draft, but his problem is at the catch point, and I'll get into that later. The offensive line is a little bit suspect. Lindstrom played well as a rookie. Caleb McGarry didn't. James Gardner was a really bad free agent signing last season. They still have some – it's a hodgepodge offensive line. They brought in Hayden Hurst and free as a second round pick from the Ravens. They brought in Todd Gurley, bringing him back home. I think that was a really good pickup. Todd Gurley, he's not done. He played really well last season, but he just didn't play much because they wanted to rest him for a playoff push, which never came because you didn't play Todd Gurley enough. And behind a dreadful offensive line, which was absolutely dreadful, he had no chance. And he played well behind that terrible offensive line. So you look at the Falcons' offensive line. If you look at the Warren Sharp's metric of success rate over average, they were negative 3%. So they were not a great running unit, but they were really well running behind the left tackle, which was obviously Jake Matthews. So I think Todd Gurley is going to have some effective runs to the outside. I think they can do some interesting stuff. Lindstrom and McGarry, they are athletic. They can pull off to the outside. I think they're going to be a pretty interesting team. Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones are two great players. The defensive line's good. I'm just concerned about Keanu Neal's health. He played, 80 snaps last season? Ricardo Allen also. I mean, their secondary is very beat up. I think that they can maybe gel together, but it looks like another season of average for them. Their defensive metrics last season put them at 17th overall, 21st against the pass, 13th against the rush. That'll probably stay around the same. They've got three-star players, or four-star players. Five. Deion Jones, Grady Jarrett, Julio Jones, Matt Ryan, Todd Gurley. I think Dante Fowler's a good pickup. I think their defensive line will be a lot better than they were. So this seems like a pretty fair adjustment or fair assessment of their roster. But they have the hardest schedule in the NFL. They have a really tough division, and that's going to be hard for them to make the playoffs with this roster. And let's look at their draft real quick because their draft is interesting. So AJ Terrell was a little bit of a reach in the first round, but he has a lot of man-to-man abilities that you really like to see. So his problem is at the catch point. He will be right on your tail throughout the entire route. But at the catch point, he's not great. But if you're in a division with Michael Thomas, Mike Evans, DJ Moore, Chris Godwin, you need to be good at the catch point, and he's not. He's got to work on that really soon. I think going against Julio Jones and Pratt will really help because Julio Jones is just an athletic specimen. So he's going to have to get better at the catch point because if not, he's just going to get bullied by Michael Thomas and Mike Evans. So he's going to be a good corner too. So you're going to really look at Isaiah Oliver stepping up. Marlon Davidson's a good run stuffer. He's going to move over from defensive end to defensive tackle. He really bulked up. I think that's a decent pick. I think he's going to be – I was lower on him, but in the system, I have no problems with that at all. Matt Hennessy, I think he'll come in and start maybe over James Carpenter immediately because he's much better. Michael Walker of Fresno is a decent linebacker. I think he should start if they're going into a base personnel, if they're going against a team that's running 12 personnel or 21 personnel. Jalen Hawkins out of Cal I didn't see much of him. I watched a lot of Ashton Davis, and Jalen Hawkins didn't really stand out in my opinion. And then Sterling Forfeiture, punter at Syracuse. I know nothing about. I don't really know how to evaluate punters. So we'll see how he does. So this roster is solid. They've got some solid pieces. Their secondary is a little weak, but they've got some potential there. Overall, they don't really have any glaring weaknesses besides left guard and will linebacker potentially. But the defenders play, we're running a lot of 11 personnel. Maybe the Saints run a little bit of 12. I think they might run a lot more 12 than they do previously, but I'll get into that. So it's an average team. They've got a tough schedule. They've got a good roster, and I think they'll go 8-8. Moving on, who do I have in second? It's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So with Tampa Bay, it's a lot of components, a lot of moving pieces because if you look at them from last year, new quarterback, new running back, new right tackle, new strong safety, new tight end. So, interesting team to say the least. I think they'll be competitive, but I do not have them making the playoffs. And that's a bold prediction, Tom Brady quarterback. So I need to explain myself why I don't have this team making the playoffs. So for first things first, look at their strength of schedule. It's It's tied 11th easiest, so they've got a fine schedule. So why are they making the playoffs? It really comes down to defense and their secondary. So last season, Tampa Bay ranked as the #1 rush defense. Whoa! Great job, Tampa Bay. You have the #1 run defense. Do you know why that was? Because your pass defense was horrendous. Teams only ran the ball on you 300 times because they passed on your team like 800 times. So, although they have one good corner, in my opinion, I really like Jamel Dean. Sean Murphy-Bunting and Carlton Davis just don't cut it for me. If you look at their free safety Jordan Whitehead, I think their two best players in the secondary are their rookie Antoine Winfield Jr., who I think is going to be great, and Jamel Dean. So their secondary is really porous, and a division with the best receivers actually really going to hurt them. And then if they want to make it in the playoffs, they have the record to make it in the playoffs. They just don't have the divisional record. And that's because with the teams in the division, they could all pass. Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, Teddy Bridgewater, DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel, Robbie Anderson. And then you got the Saints: Drew Brees, Michael Thomas, Manuel Sanders, Traquan Smith, Jared Cook. Look at these teams. Tampa Bay can't really hang with them in terms of their secondary. The defensive line is really good. Shaq Barrett, Pierre Paul, Dominic Suda, Vita Vea, and Golston. Really good front. Their line looks a lot better. Tristan Wirfs, Jensen, Marpet, and Smith. I have a lot of concern about Donovan Smith, but he plays adequately. But I think that guys like Dante Fowler maybe will take a little bit of advantage of him. Maybe Marcus Davenport, if he's healthy. They won't play with Davenport week 1, which they should be lucky about because Davenport probably would have wrecked him. Maybe they shift over Cam Jordan, but he is the left end, to be fair. So they probably won't. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Incredible duo. Godwin, I think, is going to be a top 3 receiver. He was a top 3 receiver last season. I really like him. He and DJ Moore are studs. I think those are studs people are really sleeping on because Chris Godwin's a monster. I think he's better than Mike Evans. Like, I picked him in fantasy in the second round because I think early in the second round because I really like him. So they bring in Leonard Fournette, and on paper the team looks great. I just don't think they can gel together that quickly, and I don't think Tom Brady's that good. I think Tom Brady, if you watched him last season, he really, really lost it. He's very jittery in the pocket, really looking too much looking too much at the defensive line rather than the receivers. With Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, they want to get down the field. I don't know if they can be that. Tom Brady can be that guy, can be the Jameis Winston throwing the ball on the field. Jameis Winston didn't care about an interception. Tom Brady does, and that's the difference. That's why Jameis Winston threw 30-30 last year. 30 touchdowns, 30 picks, and 5,000 yards because he didn't care. So Bruce Arians is going to have to adapt the system to Tom Brady because Tom Brady, I don't think, is capable of running this offense anymore. And that's really going to put a hindrance on both their receivers because you're not playing to their strengths, and that's going to be a big issue for them. Although this roster looks great, gelling together in only 4 weeks, building throughout the season, sure, they've got all the confidence in the world, they've got all the hype in the world, but after playing Saints week 1, I think that they're going to realize that this is a tougher schedule. Or if they win, they'll be so high in ego that they're going to get overconfident and think they're going to steamroll their way in. I think the NFC is really competitive. I just don't see them getting in. So let's look at their draft because I think they had a really good draft as well. So first round, Tristan Wirfs, second best tackle. They traded up to pick 13 to get him. Incredible pick. I think incredible pick. He'll start day 1. He's incredibly athletic. He's a little bit rough in his technique, but that's tough luck. Against Cam Jordan week 1, I really think that's going to be a big issue for him. Then, they got Antoine Winfield in the secondary. I think he's a star. I think he's the best safety in this draft class. So I think Antoine Winfield will be a stud. I think he's a beast. I think he's great in coverage. I think he's great in the box. I think he'll be a difference maker in this offense. And then they got Keyshawn Vaughn, who'll be a receiving back out of the backfield. It just depends who Tom Brady thinks is going to be their best receiving back, whether it's Vaughn, whether it's Rojo. So maybe Fournette had 70 catches last season, even though he wasn't very efficient on those, but he still was able to catch the ball. Tyler Johnson, I picked 161 as an A+. I think he's a first-round receiver they got this late. Absolute steal. I am so upset that they got him. I think if he's healthy, he'll probably take over. as that third receiver, but I did see some good stuff. There were some really good stuff out of Scotty Miller last season. He marked the Saints deep on a deep ball in Tampa Bay last season in November. So he does show some promise. This team looks really solid on paper. I just worry about their secondary in this division against a really strong passing schedule. So you look at Tampa Bay's schedule, and they play New Orleans, good passing offense. Carolina, good passing receivers. Denver, great receivers. Chargers, good receivers. Bears have a good receiver. Green Bay is a good receiver. Vegas, they got fast receivers. They don't have great receivers, but they got Darren Waller. Giants have great receivers. Saints again. Panthers again. Rams have great receivers. KC have great receivers. Minnesota have great receivers. Atlanta has great receivers. Detroit has great receivers. They're playing an entire schedule of great receivers. Their worst team is probably Las Vegas, and people really like their receiving core. So with the schedule of this many teams with this many good receivers, it's going to be hard for the secondary to keep up. As much as this other part of the roster is great, I just don't see making the playoffs. Combination of quarterback play, quarterback of system, quarterback the factors of their system, quarterback, off-season time, and their secondary. I just think this team's going to go 9-7. I think the hype train is just building momentum too much, and it's just going to come to a head. I just don't think they're going to make the playoffs. And I might be a little biased with that opinion, but we'll see at the end of the year. So that means I have the New Orleans Saints winning the division and winning the NFC at 12-4. Oh, but you're a Saints fan. Oh, of course you're going to enter the best team in the NFC. On paper, they have the best roster in the entire NFL. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. They have the most elite graded players in the league. They have probably the second most amount of above average players ranked in the league. They have the best 53-man roster in the league. From 1 to 53, it's a great team. They have the best practice squad in the league, and with a season like this, where you can call 2 players up to the active roster from the practice squad each week, this team's going to be great. There's really no weakness in this team. They have the best offensive line football, in my opinion. Great center, great tackles, some good guards. Andrews Pete, probably very overpaid, in my opinion. And then Cesar Ruiz, we'll get into. They've got the personnel to run 12. They've got some good receivers. They've got a great running back, some great depth. They've got a lot of defensive line depth. They've got a lot of secondary depth, and they've got some really good linebackers. So look at this defensive line, and it's really deep. It's very deep. So obviously, at defensive tackle, let's start with the edge. Obviously, you have Cam Jordan, top five defensive line. You have Marcus Davenport, who has graded as an elite defender last year at an 84.1 grade in very limited stats. But if he's healthy, he's going to be great. The problem is he's not healthy. He's not on the field week 1 with the elbow injury. So I'm concerned about that. Trey Hendrickson's a really good defensive end. Carl Granderson, he looks like he could break out. He looks like he's got all the athletic profile to be great. Malcolm Roach is a really promising defensive. There's a reason they kept him on the 53 roster. And then you have guys like Noah Spence, Zach Bond, and that's a really deep group. Defensive line, you got Sheldon Rankins, David Onyemata, Malcolm Brown, Shai Tuttle, who ranked as a 21st best tackle in the league as an undrafted rookie, and he's your 4th string tackle. Great value. Then you have Marcus Hunt as well. Your linebacking core, you got Demario Davis, who graded as the best linebacker in football. He's great in every facet of the game. Coverage, run, pass rush. He's great in every asset. Kiko Alonso, when healthy, is great. Then you have guys like Alex Anzalone, who's great when healthy. You got Zach Bond, who can play outside linebacker or edge rusher. And then you've got a lot of secondary depth. You've got Saquon Hampton, who Jeff Ireland thinks is a top 100 prospect in the draft last season. And Jeff Ireland has proven to be an incredible talent evaluator. You guys like TJ Swearinger and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson as backup safeties to Marcus Williams, who was rated as the 4th best safety last season, and Malcolm Jenkins they bring in, who's a great leader in the locker room. Drew's off the field issues with the flag comments were help this team come together. This team has been through so much together. This is the strongest, tightly knit locker room. They've got an incredible coach. They've got really good corners. Marshawn Lattimore has shut down Mike Evans to 0 catches, 0 yards twice in his career. Against the top cornerbacks, he's incredible. Against average receivers, he's kind of all right, but when he's motivated, he's an incredible player. He also has some injury issues too. Then you have guys like Jack Rabbit, who's really, really effective quarterback. So you look at this team, they really have no weaknesses. And you have Alvin Kamara, who has a healthy knee this year. Paid, happy, healthy. Alvin Kamara should be great this year. I think they paid him way too much money. I think they paid him a lot too much money. But that doesn't matter. It's about the roster this year. It's not about their cap space. But this year, they have everything. Oh, and what do you think? Great. They got a great backup in case something happens to Drew Brees, because I've heard this narrative that Drew Brees is injury prone now because he had a fluke thumb injury last year against Aaron Donald. So he's going to get injured, maybe. No, he's not. And if he does, Jameis Winston's an incredible backup. I think he's a top 20 quarterback in this league. You have Taysom Hill, who we saw in Minnesota was the best player on the field. You ask Mike Florio, a Vikings fan, says Taysom Hill was the best player on the field in that Minnesota game. You've got X factors everywhere. No defense can match with this offense, and this defense was great. So let's go to the defensive metrics last season, because the Saints had a really good defensive metric last year. They were 8th overall, 5th against the rush, 10th in coverage, and they only had Jack Rabbit in like the last 4 or 5 games. So you add that together, you add a Malcolm Jenkins, you add the addition of Chauncey Gardner-Johnson with another year. This secondary should be top 10 this year. They were top 10 last year. The run is always great. It's a top 10 defense, and Drew Brees has only had a top team defense twice in his career, last season and the year he won the Super Bowl. So you look at their offense. Their offense graded out as the 4th best offense, 4th in the pass, 6th in the rush. You have a healthy Kamara, that's going to be a better rush offense, and they're going to get better pass offense because of that. You have Tre'Quan Smith, addition of Emmanuel Sanders. There's no defense that can stop this offense. And although they have a tough schedule, look at it from a perspective. They have the 22nd hardest schedule. That's still pretty manageable. Not even the hardest in the division. It's the 2nd easiest in the division. This team should theoretically be the best in the NFC. And they should be a contender for the Super Bowl. I don't know how they're not. Like, you look at the betting odds, they're like 4th favorites. I think this is pretty great value here because this roster is motivated, deep, and incredibly talented. So I see no reason why they shouldn't win. Oh, and should I mention they have the 3rd best special teams in the entire league. They have Will Levis, the 2nd best kicker. They have Thomas Morstead, an incredible punter. They had an all-pro gunner in JT Gray, another all-pro the year before, Justin Hardy. They've got Taysom Hill, also plays great special teams, great punt blocks. This team is top 5 in every facet of the game, top 10 if you want to stretch it. They are top 10 in every facet of the game. And if that doesn't make you a Super Bowl contender, if that doesn't make you the best team in the NFC, you underperform. And that's why this team's got to win this year. This team has to win. There has to be a season this year because this team needs it. I need it. So that will do it for my NFC South predictions. Oh, the draft. Let's get into the draft because I completely blanked on that because I talked about most of the players. So first round, Cesar Ruiz. Great guard/center combo. Really athletic. Will be great in the run game. I think he'll be a great addition. Probably better than Larry Warford last year. And Larry Warford got on Sean Payton's bad side because he turned up to training camp out of shape. Oh, you're off the roster now. I had to tolerate you last year because I had no alternatives, but now you're gone. And then you have an offensive lineman, you have Greener. They kept him on the active roster all of last season because they thought someone was going to take him. That's a sign that he could be a really good player. Then Zach Bond at pick 74, who people thought was going to be a first-round pick, an incredible linebacker. My only problem is, does he fit in the same system with Dennis Allen at coordinator? Will he be able to get the most out of him? I don't know. Adam Trump pick 105 was my tight end number 1, a second-round pick in my opinion. They got to pick 105 in the second to last pick of the 3rd round. Great pick. This will allow them to pass 12 personnel looks with Jared Cook, either Josh Hill or Adam Troutman. Troutman also is a great blocker, will really help this run game. This team looks complete. Then you got Tommy Stevens, who's going to be a practice squad staff, converted to tight end. Doesn't really matter. They've just tried to get him not on the Panthers roster. It's just Sean Payton's spite move. He loves doing that. But this roster has every reason in the world to be the best, and I have no reason why I have no reasons why they shouldn't be the best. So that will do it for my NFC predictions, or NFC South predictions. One more division to go. If you haven't watched other predictions, go check them out on my channel. We've done the whole AFC, other NFC divisions. We're going to be doing the West next. And that'll do it. So make sure you watch those and take care.